Last month, Russia withdrew from a deal that allowed Ukraine to export grain and has since targeted Kyiv's grain infrastructure. Now, Moscow has threatened to also attack Ukrainian ships that set off from ports in the south. And for more on this, I'm joined by our international affairs editor, Philip Turle. Philip, good to see you. So, a Ukrainian container ship set off from Odesa this Wednesday to test that threat. When we talk about this word test, what exactly do we mean?
Okay, well, just a reminder that the Black Sea grain deal, which was signed a year ago, is now no longer in effect due to the fact that Russia withdrew from it last month. 47 million people have been affected by the war in Ukraine around the world, and as a result of the fall in the supplies of grain being exported from Ukraine. That was the figure for last year once the war started. That was obviously a much better figure when the Black Sea deal was signed. Now that Russia's pulled out, Ukraine is left with all this grain that it needs to export, and Russia is always threatening to attack the ships because it doesn't know if those ships are carrying military hardware or not, or weapons, or are supporting the war effort on Ukraine's side. So what Ukraine has said this time round is, well, there's this Hong Kong registered ship, which is called the Joseph Schulte, which has been in the port of Odesa in southwestern Ukraine since February last year, just a day before the war broke out. And they're going to test it to see if the ship can get past the Russian threat in the Black Sea and down through the Bosphorus Strait to export that grain, that much-needed grain, which is needed by many countries around the world. What Ukraine is saying is that this ship is going to be given full clearance from us, and all the necessary documents and paperwork will show that it has no military threat, and therefore Russia has no reason to attack it. It's stacking the pressure on Russia for two reasons. First of all, that Russia knows that Ukraine is like the breadbasket of Europe and has to export that grain to support countries around the world. And there is also pressure on Russia to do that, because even if some countries support the war effort, they know that the fall in the supply of grain to countries around the world from Ukraine will cause famine and hardship, and they want that to be avoided at all costs. So that is, I think, what Ukraine is playing at here. Let's get that grain out and see whether Russia is going to attack that ship or not.
Yeah, so we'll be watching that closely. In the meantime, Ukraine has recaptured a village in the south of the country. How significant is this?
Well, it's a small advance for Ukrainian forces. Remember, this counteroffensive has been dragging on for quite a while now and has not produced the fruits that many thought were going to be produced once it started. No one, I think, was expecting a rapid recapturing of all the territories that Russia has taken since the start of the war. But Ukraine does need some kind of good news to bolster its forces and its morale. So the fact that this town, Eurozane, has been captured in the southeast of the country is good for several reasons. First of all, psychologically, it's good news for the Ukrainian forces. Ukraine has pushed back the Russians, which shows a certain disarray amongst the way the Russian forces are organized in the region. They can say, well, look, we're not advancing quickly, but we're advancing slowly but surely, and we are progressing. So that is good news for Ukraine. And there is another aspect which I think is also important to underline, is that the capture of a town like this, which may seem small and insignificant, even if it's only a few kilometers, will force the Russians into some kind of dilemma, because they then have to decide, well, this is on the road to Mariupol in southeastern Ukraine. It also could open up a front further east towards Donetsk. What are the Ukrainians going to do after that? Does that mean we have to be very careful about which roads we are going to protect? Will we have to pull forces from other areas of Ukraine to try to stop another advance by Ukrainian forces? So I think it's also putting the pressure on Russian troops, putting them in a dilemma about what to do. And that is, I think, part of the strategy of Ukraine right now. They've advanced by about 12 kilometers in the past 2 months. It doesn't appear to be much, but in Ukraine's eyes, this is still proof that we are still advancing, and it's not Russia which is pushing us the other way so far.
Okay, International Affairs Editor Philip Turle. Philip, thanks as always.